Already people are beginning to forget about communism. They're beginning to forget about the victims of communism, which now number, we know, about 100 million. I mean, there was no freedom. There was no freedom of speech, no freedom of religion, no freedom of thought. People couldn't write a poem or a play or a story or conduct a scientific experiment without some censor first approving it. All of that story has to be told.
Back in 2014, I got a phone call from a physician at the Mayo Clinic who reached out and said, I need to tell a journalist what just happened. He told me that his elderly mother, who lives with him and his wife, had been raised in Czechoslovakia. When communism came to power there after the Second World War, the government told her to quit going to church. She said, I'm not going to quit going to church. They threw her in prison for 4 years and tortured her as a so-called Vatican spy. She immigrated to America, started her life here. Now she was telling her son, the things I see happening in America today remind me of what was happening in my own country when communism came. Well, what was the old lady seeing? She's seeing the effects of cancel culture. She was seeing people facing the loss of job and the loss of their livelihood for getting on the wrong side of the politically correct. People being afraid to speak their minds for fear of losing their job or being hounded out of polite society. So over the next few years, if I would meet someone who had grown up under Soviet communism but came to America, I would put the question to them. Are the things you're seeing happen in our country today in any way reminiscent of what you left behind? Every single one of them said yes.
In a new book, my next guest suggests that we may be heading down a dangerous path toward totalitarianism. Live Not by Lies.
A remarkable new book entitled Live Not by Lies.
Live not by lies.
Live not by lies.
Live not by lies.
Live not by lies. Inspired not least by the great Alexander Solzhenitsyn.
I got the title for the book from an essay by Alexander Solzhenitsyn. Solzhenitsyn is probably the greatest dissident to emerge out of the Soviet world. He wrote a book called The Gulag Archipelago, which was a thick book that told the truth about the system of prison camps in the Soviet Union that the Soviets denied having. The Soviets exiled him from the country. They kicked him out in 1974. Just before he was kicked out, he sent a short essay to all of his followers. The name of the essay was Live Not by Lies. What he wanted his followers to do is simply to refuse to say that they believed things that they didn't believe, because the whole communist system was built on lies. Lies about human nature, lies about the way the world is, and it can only be sustained when people are afraid to live in truth.
Everybody in the Soviet system lied about everything to everyone all the time. And so the whole system was set up and maintained because everyone lied.
There are so many people among the intelligentsia especially who are absolutely immune to facts. It's as if they took their anti-fact shots every year, and the facts will just not affect them.
They lied about Afghanistan, the Patriot Act. They shut down schools over COVID and then stole a bunch of pandemic relief for themselves.
We have to say that men can have babies, that men can be women and women can be men.
The woke fraternity present America as if it is an exceptionally racist society today. Women are so completely prejudiced against that we basically all live in a Margaret Atwood novel. None of this is a fair estimation of this society.
One of the things that disturbs me tremendously is about this enthusiasm for socialism at a time when people are literally starving in Venezuela, an oil-rich country. Even when I was a Marxist, I had the same intellectual standards.
Right.
And that's what eventually led me away from it.
Yesterday I asked ChatGPT, are there any similarities between today's woke revolution and Chairman Mao's cultural revolution of the 1960s? And it wrote back, how long do you have?
Refugees from the Soviet system you talk to, when they watch the woke revolution underway in our country, what's their reaction to it?
They say it seems like old times because they have lived through this sort of thing before. Totalitarian governments try to take away cultural memory, which is to say the memory of a people that tells them who they are. We've seen this happen in our own country with statues taken down, where history suddenly becomes extremely contentious. The 1619 Project that's falsifying American history to demoralize Americans about our own country. Well, this is exactly what happened in totalitarian regimes. When the Nazis invaded Poland, their plan to crush the Polish nation involved destroying the Poles' sense of themselves as a nation and to destroy their religion, their Catholicism. The Nazis knew that if they destroyed those two things, then the Polish people were putty in their hands. We have for so long thought that Christianity is all about taking suffering away. That's just not true. Some of the more political churches, whether they're of the left or of the right, want us to believe that if we just get the right politicians in office, the right judges on the bench, everything's going to be okay. This is a lie. This is a lie that is paralyzing us while the storm is gathering outside. People don't take it seriously because they think of totalitarianism, and what comes to mind is George Orwell. What comes to mind is Stalin, secret police, gulags, firing squads, things like that. That's not what we're dealing with yet, at least. In China, they have what's called a social credit system under which the Chinese government controls every Chinese citizen. It has the computer power to track everybody's movements all throughout the day. If you meet with people the government considers to be antisocial, that is to say Christians or dissidents, that is noted by the system and you get automatically a lower social credit rating. Eventually, if you get a low enough social credit rating, you can't buy or sell or participate in the economy. Now that should send chills down the spine of every Christian who knows his or her Bible. Hannah Arendt was the great scholar of totalitarianism. She was a survivor of Nazi Germany, and after the war was over, she set out to figure out why it was that Germany and Russia both surrendered to totalitarianism. She said the number one factor that made totalitarianism possible in those countries was people being separated from each other and feeling overwhelming loneliness.
And U.S. Surgeon General issued a new advisory on loneliness.
Loneliness is an epidemic.
And it's only going to get worse in the metaverse, which is more realistic fakery to keep the masses fat and happy and numb to the world that's spiraling around them.
We know that communities that are more connected have lower levels of violence, they have higher economic prosperity, they're more resilient in the face of adversity, and they're more protected against division and polarization.
A second factor that makes us vulnerable to totalitarianism is a loss of faith in institutions. This was what happened in Russia before the communist revolution there and in pre-Nazi Germany. And it's happening now in our country.
A new survey from the Pew Research Center finds the nation increasingly distrustful of the federal government. The findings released today show that about 1/4 of Americans trust government to do the right thing. A whopping 73% do not.
Trust in our nation's military is down to just 48%.
I know that they're lying to me. I know that they're lying to the nation.
Alexander Solzhenitsyn said that the line between good and evil does not pass between social classes or between, races or anything else. The line between good and evil passes right down the middle of every human heart. I remember standing on a street corner in Moscow talking to a white-haired, elderly Russian Baptist pastor, a man whose father and the fathers of all the men in his community when they were little were taken away by Stalin and sent to Siberia. He said, go back to America and tell the church, if you're not prepared to suffer for your faith, then your faith is worthless. Well, what did he mean by that? Christ himself suffered and died on a cross. Through every generation of Christianity, even today in countries like Egypt, in the Muslim world, and in China, Christians are suffering for their faith. It is vital that we get this eyewitness testimony on camera so people in our country will not forget history, but they'll know history and they'll learn from history so that we can build the resistance now while we still have the freedom to do so. We have the gift from Almighty God of liberty and the resources to be able to come together, to study, to pray, and to get busy working to build our networks of resilience right now. Eventually, this whole system of lies will fall apart, but it will take longer for it to fall apart if people are afraid to stand up for the truth, if people are afraid to have the courage to resist, to say, you do to me whatever you can, I will not live by lies.